I've been pretty bad at these intros so far, so it might take me a few goes.
I'm looking forward to it.
I thought you did them at the end and then just edit them in.
I think I prefer it with all of us though. It does look better than zoomed in on my fucking mind. Basically.
All right, give it a go.
Ready?
Yeah, go on. I'm just waiting for it now.
All right.
I've got expectations now. Go on.
Welcome to the Everyday Perspective podcast. Today we're talking leadership and accountability with Dan Casey. Dan is a senior leader within the learning and development industry. He's a part-time martial artist and builder of tables.
That's me. Thank you for the intro.
Welcome, Dan.
Good to be here.
How about the table? Do you like it?
Yeah, it's looking good.
Yeah.
Imagine that started as a few scaffold boards.
Yeah, it did.
What's that, a couple of months ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, look what can be achieved, eh?
Yeah, I built it.
I oversaw a little bit.
I've seen Paul's DIY skills, and I'd definitely say he didn't.
Yeah. He's basically put up all the curtains.
Yeah, I was wondering who did it.
Yeah. I do the manly stuff, and then Paul's like the woman in the relationship.
That's why he's wearing the white beater today. Mate.
Exactly. To keep him in check.
Anyway, thanks for coming on.
Welcome.
So we're obviously talking leadership and accountability today. So start off with a big question, mate. What does leadership mean to you?
So I think it means a number of things. I think the first one I'd sort of separate out is it's often spoken about in the context of management. The fundamental difference for me is that management requires you to have a title or role. Leadership doesn't, which means that no matter where you are, no matter what job you're in, you can be a leader if you essentially create followership. So that's as good as somebody being engaged in something you're doing and agreeing with you and supporting it. Then essentially you're demonstrating leadership through that. I think if you look at it longer term, it's about taking responsibility to solve problems, to create change, to make a difference, whether that's in your personal life or in business. It's about actually solving problems and taking personal responsibility to do something about it, which is why it links so much to me with accountability.
Yeah, okay. So as you say, it's not just work related, it applies to being a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. It applies to, I guess, everything you do, because if you're not leading a situation, then, are you following it? Or are you just sort of passive? What's actually going on? So, yeah, I'd say it applies to all. Okay,
perfect. And judging by your accent, you're privately school educated, been to university, that's how you know about all this stuff?
No, I have not been to university.
Private school?
Well, I did a small stint at a private school when I was about 7 or 8 years old.
Okay, when you say a small stint, what was that, like 10 years?
I think it was like a couple of terms.
A couple of terms? And can you pick up an accent like that at 7 years old?
No, I've just maintained it very well over the years. I think partly because I moved around a fair bit as well, so I haven't really been one place long enough to pick up an accent.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So what is your background then? So how do you know about this stuff?
Background from a career point of view, or?
Yeah, tell us whatever's relevant. So where you just said that leadership isn't just career, it's life and everything else. So tell us where you've picked up what leadership means, and then give us some anecdotes of what it's kind of done for you over the years.
Yeah, okay. So I think I'll look at it from a career point of view, because that's probably easier to go through.
Yeah,
it's for me, it's always been trying to improve something, trying to address a problem, trying to solve something or make something better. And by doing that, you're essentially marking yourself out as leading a situation rather than waiting for something to happen. And that's the big thing about accountability, right? So if you take accountability for something, you're essentially giving yourself the authority to do something about it and the responsibility for whatever happens. So if it's good, great, well done you. And if it isn't, you've got to be prepared to deal with the consequences. So that whole leadership and accountability piece is so important in essentially giving yourself the freedom to do whatever you want to do. So, if I was thinking about earlier on in my career, it was constantly looking to do my job, plus what else can I do that's actually going to enhance the business or the team or the strategy or people around me.
What sort of jobs was that?
So I guess probably I've done my fair share of fairly unpleasant jobs.
Like what? Come on, give us some.
I spent a lot of time working on farms when I was younger.
Okay.
Yeah, so probably the lowest job, and I'm not including mucking out, lots of stalls, but was walking behind a tractor at slow walking pace, lifting stones out of a field for 3 or 4 days. That was fairly.
What was the pay like?
I did it for nothing.
What, because you lived on the farm? Or?
No, I was just interested in how to run a farm, and I was interested in learning and understanding it. So I just said, "Can I come and help?" And he said, "I'm not going to pay." I said, "Fine."
What a hero! He probably couldn't afford to pay you. In fairness, what the supermarkets are paying.
Yeah. I don't think that's such a bad gig. You're outdoors, you're exercising.
Yeah.
My worst job was stood on a production line in a pasty factory.
Yeah, that'd be worse. That'd be a lot worse.
And I had to stand there and watch the pasties go by. And if they were defected, I'd have to take them off the conveyor belt, clear the contents, put the pastry into one basket, content into another. And I did that for 12 hours.
Yeah, that sounds.
That
sounds like shit.
Yeah, I lasted 3 days.
Yeah, I'm surprised you lasted 3 days. I would have gone after the first hour.
Yeah, it was a skiving 3 days. They basically fired me after 3 days.
Is that what it was? Yeah.
Disappearing off the production line. Apparently that's a problem in production.
Yeah. Who'd have thought?
Yeah.
No, but I mean, again, it's a huge learning experience. I went there just purely for the intent to learn and understand it, and yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
I was like, I guess I was 12, 13 years old. Did that for a few years.
Okay.
But yeah, so I guess after that, from a career point of view, I spent some time working in hospitality. So learned to be a cocktail barman, which is always useful.
Okay. So what, mixologist?
I think that's the official term. I don't think that term
Is that what you call yourself?
I would not call myself that.
Okay.
No, not a chance.
Tom Cruise?
More opinionated.
I definitely.
Tom Cruise want to be?
Opinionated when it comes to making drinks, I guess, now.
I've seen him at a party, to be fair. He takes ownership of the drinks.
Yeah, I'm like, no, it's not like that.
He's that guy.
Do you want me to come around and help you? Yeah.
He wants the pina coladas.
So yeah, a bit of hospitality work.
Some call centres.
Okay.
Which, again, I guess is a version of a production line.
It is.
And I guess as I start to look through all these, there's another thing that's coming out is no matter how shit a job is, you have two choices. As you look at that job, you go, that's a nightmare job. I hate it. It's terrible. Or you go, yeah, that was a nightmare, but I've learned this from it. And one of the biggest things I learned from call centre work was, apart from the resilience to keep doing it, was note taking and how important something as simple as that is as you go through your career. I mean, and especially what I do now from a consulting point of view, if you're not actually capturing the conversation, what's being said, how can you do anything with it? So for me, it's always looking at taking the positives from whatever you're doing as well. Because it's quite easy to just look back and go, yeah, that was awful. Yeah. But actually, that doesn't help you.
I think everyone's had that awful job, haven't they? You know what I mean? I think everyone's had that awful job. And that's really good advice to take a positive out of that.
100%.
You know, and then sometimes it's probably hard, but there is always a positive in there somewhere.
Even if it's just, the tenacity of sticking at a job long enough to make sure your CV looks good. And that was some advice that Rebecca gave to me when I was in the call centre. I was just like, I really can't stand it. It's like, you got to stay there long enough to start to build some consistency. Otherwise, how are you going to, start laying the foundations for your next job?
Yeah, no, it's very true. I think I've done years of call centre work as well. And I think we've talked about this before, how at the time, I just couldn't see the point in any of it. Yeah. And even years after, I still couldn't see the point in any of it. And I just felt like it was a wasted period of my life. But at some point, you just feel like you connect the dots a little bit. And now suddenly some of those skills, communication skills, note-taking, that they now play a really key role in some of the stuff that I do now.
But some of that can be the catalyst for you to work harder because you don't want to do that shit job anymore.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? Like, you get into a better job and you think, fuck, I ain't going back to that.
Yeah.
There's no fucking way. So I'm going to work really hard in this good job I've got to never go back to that shit.
There's a scene in Peaky Blinders that I love that is exactly that, where I think, I can't remember what season it is, but he's doing a deal with the horses, Tommy, and he goes down to the stables.
Yeah, and he starts mucking it out.
Yeah, starts mucking it out.
Yeah, I've watched that,
And the stable hand's like, Tommy, like, what are you doing? And he says, just reminding myself who I'd be if I wasn't me. And, no offense, intended to stable hands, but that's the point. It's, it's knowing, the importance of applying yourself in these roles, I think, because if you won and you just coasted through, you'd remain in that position.
Yeah, and I think, so I think one of the first call centre jobs I had, I stuck at it for, I can't remember how long enough, probably like 9 months or something, not a huge amount of time. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I took a lot from it for that time, and that's when I went into bar work, which was great fun and probably less than half the pay. It's something like, I think it was about £3.80 an hour at the time. But then, went back eventually, and I spoke to somebody in a recruitment agency, and I said, I quite like the idea of what you're doing. What do I need to do to get that? And they said, you need to go and get some sales experience. So I then went when I did door-to-door sales training and actually door-to-door sales.
Just jumping into the deep end, isn't it?
Yeah, which again is, from a resilience point of view.
What's that like?
It's really not good.
Do people just shut the door in your face?
It's really not good. I wouldn't recommend it. But again, the resilience you develop by actually having to get up every morning and go out and do something that is actually really, really tough. You've got a lot of positives to take from it. And then eventually, so I went out another call centre for long enough to actually develop some consistency in my CV, and then went back to the same recruitment agency who were actually advertising at the time. Went through an assessment centre, and that's where I met Damien. And I was successful becoming a recruitment consultant. So that's, I guess, where I first kicked off my career.
Just on that, because I years ago looked at doing recruitment as well, and I think a lot of people don't have an appreciation what being a recruitment consultant actually is, and it's very heavily sales based, isn't it? And you alluded to that already, but I think, and this is a question I want to ask real quick just to interject, but I think sales skills or the ability to sell in so many different roles is really, really important. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would, and I'd specifically talk about the nature of sales, I guess, and what it is and what good sales looks like and bad sales looks like. And for me, the distinct difference is call center is push selling. So you're trying to push something down somebody's throat, whereas good consulting conversations should be where you're providing a solution based on the questions you asked, and that's pull sales. And it's far more effective. I don't believe really that push sales has got a place today, but the skills that you learn in how to ask really good questions, how to bring a solution together, how to actually write a proposal. You want a job, that's what you're doing. You want to be able to prepare for an interview, think about the question. So it's absolutely a skill set that you can use in pretty much any other environment.
Yeah. I did a job years ago, and I'd already learned some sales skills at this point, and I was relearning it and just sort of looking at different nuances and everything else. And after the course, the guy said, "Oh, you should go out this evening. There's a club nearby." I was working away at the time, and he said, "Go out and apply some of these sales skills to girls." And it becomes really effective as a way to just chat with women as well. Honestly,
I think
it's just
starting any conversation, if you can ask good questions, it's hugely powerful. And as soon as you ask a question, you're in control of the conversation.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. So, and I guess so I did. That company, excellent training. We went away for a full week. Proper away residential training, which doesn't really happen so much anymore. And then I was trained again and again. And so I again, excellent training. It's something that's been, I guess, a large part of the development of my career from a leadership and success point of view. So a lot of the organisations I've worked for, fortunately, have been really, really good at providing great training. So whilst I don't necessarily have the academic experience from university, I've had a lot of the sort of applied training in the workplace. So from there, I actually went up into another organisation still based on recruitment, and started delivering learning for the first time. So I did a 2-week train the trainer course and started delivering learning, training around helping people get into work. So it's recruitment, interview skills, CV, confidence building, all those sorts of things. And then I moved to another company in the same sector. And that's when probably one of the best examples of taking responsibility for a situation over which you have no actual authority. So I wasn't responsible for people. I was, an individual contributor like everyone else. And we had multiple contracts with multiple people in my role in each of those contracts. And we were responsible for going out and essentially, getting companies interested so we could place people into work. So generating, I guess, commitment to recruit from us as an organisation. I think there's about 5 or 6 people who were all doing the same thing but on different contracts, all going to the same organisations but with the same name. So we'd be badgering one company 5 times. And I was like, this is pointless. We're just making ourselves look stupid. Why don't we actually go, well, I'll go to that company and everything I bring back will share proportionally across the contracts that we've got. So if my contract is worth 50%, then I'll take 50% of the vacancies because I've got more people that potentially need to go into work. I did that really successfully for I can't remember how long, but it was that example that I used to get my first, I guess, like proper management level role, because it was demonstrating how do you lead, and also how do you lead without authority, because I had no position to do that. But if you've got a really good idea and you can actually sell the benefit, or you can actually get people to engage and understand what the benefit is, then that's leading.
Yeah, that's a really good point there in regard to leading without authority, because that applies in lots of different things.
100%.
I guess that applies almost more so in life opposed to work, because often when you're trying to lead in life, you don't have authority over people. And also in some roles within work as well, whether it be project management or if you're working across matrix teams, and then again, you don't have that authority. So what are the key points in regard to the ability to do that, do you think?
So I think even in work where even if you're in a senior role, you still don't have authority over somebody else's line of business, right? So even then, I've got to still engage with multiple other people to get things to happen. And for me, it's about being able to, being able to bring people with you so that they understand the why, they understand the rationale, they understand the benefit to the organisation or to the customers or to them. And it's generating the commitment for somebody to follow you, I guess. And I think that's the essence of leadership. And in that example, I was able to talk about that at interview, and then actually took on a role which was responsible for what grew to be about 16 people across Devon. Yeah. So it's just an example for me of actually, if you take responsibility for something, even if it's not directly yours, then that's leadership in practice.
So when you were just going back a little bit, when you was changing from job to job, a little bit between in the same sector, was it for money? Was it for was it better opportunity? Was it for more career? Should people in those situations, because some people don't like changing jobs, people are quite scared at times to take the plunge to a different job, or I'm fine where I am, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. What would your advice be to those sorts of people? Would you say go for it if you think it's a good opportunity? And, there's always more opportunities out there if that doesn't work out. Yeah,
I think, it's a really good point. And I think there's this idea of sort of company loyalty that people think if I just stay with this company for 15, 20 years, I'll get the progression and I'll get into that position.
Or they're like, you're still here after 15, 20 years.
and you've gone nowhere.
And it's a balance. I guess the first thing is it's what do you want as an individual? Because if you just want to stay there and you don't want to progress, then the world needs that. Businesses need that. And if you get great job satisfaction from doing that, good. What I was looking for me was, how am I going to develop? How am I going to grow? How am I going to be challenged in a new role or a new sector or whatever it might be in a way that will, help me grow and help me progress? And, going to a managerial role was for me, I wanted to think, how can I have the best impact on the business, on the customers, on the clients? And that's why I want to do it. And, the people I'm responsible for. In terms of the advice I give people around that is you got to understand why you're doing it in the first place. So, what's important to you? Is it money? Great. Okay. So is it money? I didn't. If I was really interested in money point of view, I probably would have moved to the southeast and be earning probably twice what I'm earning now. So there is a degree where money is important. You need enough, and that can change. But ultimately, if that's your real motivator, you've got to think about where you're going to get that from. So, understanding why you want to move, understanding what you're looking for. So if you don't have a goal, you don't have a plan in mind about moving a job or moving career, you're never going to make it happen. If you wanted to lose weight, if you wanted to gain muscle, you're going to follow a plan, right? You're going to have a goal in place and a plan to get there. Growing your career, developing yourself, it's the same thing. So if you don't understand what's important to you, what drives you, what motivates you, what you value in a workplace, what you don't, finding that rewarding role or organisation is so much more difficult because you don't actually know what it is you're looking for.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do get stuck in that rut, don't they? And they don't really have a career plan. When you start a new business, you have a business plan or you have this.
But exactly. You have a business plan.
But not many people have a career plan. do they? No one goes into a job thinking, oh, how am I going to get into a higher position and how to map that out? And I think what you could offer, or what people could offer, is maybe a way to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's understanding that development in your career doesn't necessarily come from a higher position all the time. It could be that you could do a number of sideways moves to develop the skill set, the experience that enable you to go to the next level role. If the next level role is what's important to you, and let's kind of come back to what motivates you.
Some people don't want the pressure, do they?
Yeah,
some people are quite happy at
It's a huge amount of pressure. If you're responsible for, I don't know, people, you're responsible for a team of 10. That's pressure. A team of 50, yeah, more pressure. A team of 100. All of a sudden,
I can imagine. Yeah.
I think you really notice that shift if you've moved from a position where you're part of a team, and then you move into that leadership role.
100%. Yeah,
it's a huge shift. You really notice it, and when I've done that previously, I noticed a few things. And firstly, you suddenly realise how many fucking issues people have.
Yeah,
because you work around these people,
personally, or
basically. But you work around these people, and people, it's need to know, right? So they'll confide in their managers or their leadership because they need support with certain things, but they won't tell their colleagues or their peers because some of it's embarrassing or whatever. But then when you suddenly move into that role and suddenly everybody starts coming to you because now you're the leader in the support, you suddenly go, fucking hell! I have no idea any of this stuff was going on, and that really surprised me. And the other issue you've got is, of course, where when you're working on the same level as people, and your friends and colleagues, the moment you move into a more senior role, those relationships I found were really tested.
Do they change?
With some people are fine, but there's some people who just, that.
Do they think they'll get like a leg up because of your mate, or like bend the rules maybe, or anything like that?
And if you think about this, it's generally referred to as mate to manager. And, people understanding the difference between being a peer and actually being responsible for the same group of people. It's one of the most difficult shifts to make. I don't think I've had to make that in the same company. I've just realised that I have. But I think it was because I was at a fairly senior level when that happened, that it wasn't quite the same. I think it's probably more difficult from going from an individual contributor at a more junior level to manage that team at supervisor level, or maybe your first line management level. I think that's probably the more difficult shift. It typically happens earlier on in your career as well. So maybe less confident or less experienced in
a bit younger, maybe.
Yeah, perhaps.
A bit younger.
So I think that's one of the most difficult shifts to make. Right, where did we get to? I'm just still thinking from a career point of view.
So we're at recruitment. I think you moved into a sort of leadership position there, but you've not. I guess we've not got to that point of where you're currently working.
Yeah. So sorry, I'll probably accelerate a few. Because I was essentially responsible for a business engagement type work. So it's still that consultative approach going out to businesses. I then managed operational teams in the same company. And I moved from there to a university where I was responsible for their employer engagement. Anyway, that employers engaged with the university was through the team that I led. And we did lots of big careers fairs, big events as well. So you spent some time there. And what I realised as I was then thinking about my next move after the university was I've spent my whole career to that date, doing my job plus, like always trying to solve a problem, make something better, improve something. And I realised what motivates me is solving a problem, making something better, right? And I was like, what kind of job can I go into where essentially that's my focus? I'm going to be consistently putting a solution in front of somebody that's going to solve a problem. And this is the power of having, establishing relationships. Damien, who I met when I got a job at the recruitment agency, he and I stayed in touch. I'm still good friends with him now. He'd been trying to get me to work for this company for a while, and eventually I did. I started off in a mid-level sales role, and I'm now in my 5th role in that organisation. So again, the career progression has happened within that organisation. For me, I always was like 2.5 years in a role before I want to look to move, and I've been able to do that within my current organisation, which is great.
So Dan, you mentioned you're in your 5th role in your current organisation. So can you explain just quickly what it is that you actually do for the business?
Yeah, sure. So I'm responsible for a division of well over 100 people now. and at different levels, all the way through when we first engage with the client for what it is they need, right through to the operational delivery of the service ongoing. So there are multiple functions within that, but essentially I have the overall accountability for setting the vision, setting the strategy, and achieving, I guess, the goals and the strategy that come out as a result of that.
So what exactly does that do for people that don't know what the learning and development roles are? Like, what is it you exactly do? Like,
fairly big question, I guess. I'm going to talk about it in the context of I guess, more
just the most
experience I've had.
the most basic version of it.
It is as a sector, it is the sector that equips people to do their jobs effectively. So learning and development could cover everything from ensuring that you've got the technical skills that you need to operate a certain piece of machinery. Could be that you need a working height certification in order to do your job.
So it's company to company, yeah?
Yeah, typically.
And it's like a background sort of stuff.
Typically.
Yeah?
But then it could also be leadership development. It could be developing your sales skills. It could be developing...
It's really broad, isn't it?
It's everything, yeah.
Does the company you work for, do they specifically have an aim, or do they do it? Is it that broad? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's really broad. We probably have there is a big focus on the leadership management space and personal effectiveness. Then there's another part of the business which essentially manages the learning for other organisations in its entirety.
Right, okay.
So that means that you're sourcing any type of learning, from highly specialist technical stuff right through to your everyday presentation skills.
And just to clarify, so you talked about developing and equipping people with these skills, and you do that through training courses?
Yeah, so a lot of training courses and perhaps longer term programs as well. Okay. And if I think about, from a career point of view, some of the organisations I worked at, where I was getting management training, leadership training, how to conduct interviews effectively, how to do all the HR elements of management as well. And again, that investment in your people is huge, because that gave me such a strong foundation in being able to do that. It was only when I started to move to different organisations, I was like, oh, that's not standard. They were just particularly good at it.
Yeah, okay. It brings me on to a question that I really wanted to ask, actually, because I have a bit of an awareness of what you do, as you know, having been in that sector previously as well. And people think about courses and learning, and they think about university.
Yeah.
You've already mentioned that you didn't go to university. So what is the difference between the type of training and courses that your industry offer versus what you would see in academia?
It's a good question. I think the fundamental difference is, with the exception of the vocational type degrees in universities where you're actually learning, something that is applied.
And sorry, just in regard to terminology, so what do you call the type of courses that you offer? Is it vocational? So
if at university you're talking about vocational, so that'd be like something like nursing. It's a really applied. Yeah, there's a theory behind it, but it's really applied. The exception of that, academia is much more knowledge based. It is,
based around theory.
Yeah, researching. Being able to cite that, being able to talk about it, being able to reference it. If you think about, I don't know, history or English as a degree, it's very much focused on, I guess, more of the cerebral activities rather than the application of it. The type of learning in a more corporate sense, the sort of L&D sense in the sector that I'm in, is equipping people to be really effective at their jobs, whether that is the technical skills that I've spoken about, or it's how to manage your team well, how to motivate people, how to lead people, how to create organisations that are effective because of the strategies and the vision that is in place to drive the business forward. So it's much more about the application and getting something to happen in the business that you're in, rather than the acquisition of knowledge.
Are these services expensive for the companies? Just out of curiosity.
Are we, when you ask that question, are you comparing that to degrees or just a general question?
I was just thinking then, when you're talking exactly that, like compared to a degree, obviously it's not going to cost the employee that, but what does it cost potentially the company? So, it's got to be worth it, obviously, for them, because they're upskilling their employees. But is it like, would you have to be a certain size company to be able to afford those sort of services?
Probably, yeah. I would say you probably would.
But it's something that individuals can just go and pay for themselves and do it, right?
They could do, yeah. So you can get publicly scheduled courses. But there's a really good quote, and I need to remember who it was who said it.
We'll put it in the description at the end, mate.
It's Richard Branson. I'm going to say Richard Branson, don't I? He says a few things. Like that.
Yeah, it says a lot, mate.
It says a lot. And it's like, what happens if we develop all our people and they leave? And the response is, what happens if we don't and they stay?
Yeah,
and that's the point. Is like, okay, do you want the best people? And actually, if you've got really, great development opportunities within your organisation, you create highly engaged people. There's a great article on Harvard Business Review called "Putting the Service Profit Chain to Work." 5-minute read, and it talks about actually if you have higher employee engagement, they will deliver a better service, and you will get increased revenues through that. So actually, doing the right thing for your people is also doing the right thing for the business.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense, doesn't it? It's just obviously you have to be a certain size business probably to be able to afford that. And then again, financially, to be able to pay for that personally would probably be quite an expense.
Yeah, you do.
And it would be paid for probably in a different way that you would pay for university. So you pay for university through loans and this and that. And it's paid through, everyone knows kind of how student loans work, but then that would be slightly different.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that. And I guess in regard to our industry, so fitness, you have... And to be a personal trainer, you can just do a level 3 personal training course.
And it's shit.
or you could be, you could have a master's degree in sports science. So there's a huge disparity between the range of qualification that you're able to obtain to do the same role. And I think to savvy people, they'll ask for credentials and qualifications, and that for some people may direct them in regard to who they go with. But certainly within personal training, because a lot of it is based around sort of working with people and inspiring people and coaching, those qualifications, the degrees don't always transfer that well. Because if it's a sports science degree, it teaches you the underpinning physiology and anatomy and everything else, but it doesn't teach you the people skills.
No.
It doesn't teach you the ability to actually get clients.
To sell it to anyone.
And it certainly doesn't give you the ability to inspire people to make change in their life. So for me, to some extent, I've got both, but I almost feel like my degree was great, but actually some of the applied experience that I've got, which I could have got with that basic qualification, has been more valuable.
Yeah.
So my question was that, based on that, from I guess an organizational point of view, do companies value that type of training and applied experience as much as a degree or more than a degree, would you say?
I think that's going to vary a lot on the sector. There are some industries and sectors you need to work in, you have to have the degree, right? So let's discount some of those, because you're not going to become an engineer without an engineering degree or equivalent level qualification.
Maybe just apply it to your sector.
So for me, in my own experience, not having had that has not held me back at all. Working for organisations that have great learning and development offering, understanding what it is, taking responsibility for my own learning and progressing myself. That's what's been recognised. So I don't feel I've been remotely held back by not having a degree. Yeah.
Have you ever felt pressure to do that though? To get a degree? Has there been times where you thought, I may not be getting a promotion here, or I may not be able to go further without getting the degree? You kind of obviously navigated that somehow, but I imagine there are certain jobs where probably a lot of the people that are high in the chain have degrees, have this, have that, and then you look at them and think, I'm going to have to go and get a degree to maybe get that promotion.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I have absolutely felt that pressure. You get to a certain level, and you can start to feel a bit of imposter syndrome. It's like, shit, why am I here? How am I actually here? And I've looked at doing. I was looking at doing an MBA. I was looking at
what's an MBA?
So Masters in Business Administration. So it's one of the most typical one that sort of people in business do from a degree point of view. Mm-hmm. It's about 17K for a start. So I'm like, okay, that's a lot.
Yeah, so what's that, a 3-year degree? 4?
Do you know what? 17K and then see.
Not past that.
And then 3, 4, 5, it don't matter.
But then also seeing the amount of work that's required to do that, and then working the hours that I work, and I do work, long hours a lot of the time, I was just like, that's just not going to happen. I'm not going to be able to do both. But I have felt that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But then you actually look at, where does some of my credibility come from? It comes from the experience of having done it. It comes from how I've informed my point of view from, non-academic learning. So actually, understanding what good leadership actually is, how to design programs, how to deliver, all of those kind of things, which are built on my experience, means that when I'm having conversations with my clients and I can talk about my point of view, I've got the credibility to do that. Would a degree validate that? Yeah, probably. Are there other qualifications that I could get that would also validate it? Absolutely. So that's more where I'd be looking to go. Because actually now it's more about, I guess, for me, having that sense of validation rather than actually needing the qualification itself.
Yeah. So you'd only really be doing it for your own personal development, really, just to maybe further your own knowledge in something, but you may not, at the point you're at now, maybe you don't need it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So just because I'm not going down a formal learning route doesn't mean that my learning stops. So I'm and again, this is where I would encourage people. There is endless information out there. There's endless learning that for free for people. You don't actually have to pay for a lot of learning. There
really?
There's lots of organisations that if you want to find something out, you just need to know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Think about all the stuff you can find on YouTube, right? If I wanted to change a light bulb on a car and I didn't know how to, I'll go on YouTube and I'll find out how to do it. So I can equip myself with something I'd have no knowledge of. I don't need to then go and watch the next, hour about how to strip down the whole engine. I just need to know what I need to know for that time. So learning and choosing to keep yourself current is available to everyone if you're prepared to do it.
No, that's cool, man. That's really good advice. And I wanted to ask the question because obviously I'm mindful of our audience and people watching and giving them something to take away from this episode. I wanted to ask the question around how does someone get promoted? And I think we've kind of covered off different facets of it already, but maybe to summarize a little bit. So I guess the first thing that I've taken from you so far is that people firstly need to make a choice on whether they actually want to get promoted or not, because it's not for everybody. And then the other thing is being accountable and sort of thinking about how you can kind of do your job plus more. It sounds in many ways that you're quite a natural leader, and you've kind of almost just organically started doing that. And then maybe, many people aren't in that position for whatever reason. So I guess one just sort of final point is in regard to learning and development. If somebody does want to get promoted, are there courses that, will teach them some of those things around decision-making, accountability, leadership? And if they were to do that, do you feel that would put them in good stead to get promoted?
Yes to the first part of that, no to the second. It's very much about actually doing. So, attending a course isn't the same as actually putting that in the application.
So let me phrase the question differently then. So if you were to give your son advice right now on how he does well in a job, and you were to summarize that in some sort of elevator pitch, because I know you're good at this.
Yeah.
What would you say to him?
Work hard.
And does that, you mentioned a minute ago about doing long hours. Does working hard, what does that look like? Does that mean doing long hours?
I'm not giving you a good answer here, am I? So success, I don't believe success comes without hard work. And maybe that hard work is effective work, not necessarily working long hours. So being able to succeed at what your job is designed to do is the first thing. So if you can nail your job and then demonstrate more responsibility, more capability, more accountability, taking responsibility to sort things that aren't necessarily within your direct remit, that's when you start to be noticed. That's when you can start to create opportunities. This like concept of, are people lucky, or are lucky people those people who have their eyes open for opportunities and they're constantly asking questions and they're networking with the right people. Yeah. So because and thereby they create their own luck. So if you're doing your job well, if you're then taking responsibility for additional and you're showing that, and there's no space in your organisation to grow or to be promoted or to move to a different level role or to earn more money, then what other organisations are out there that can do that?
Yeah. Do you think personality and appearance has any say on how you progress in the workplace? And being like honest, do you think the guy that maybe he's, looks after himself, carries himself better, all those types of things, even if they're not maybe as good at the job as maybe someone else who doesn't look as good.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
And they carry themselves a certain way and they're really charismatic and all those types of things. Do you think sometimes they've been promoted ahead of people that maybe shouldn't have?
Potentially. I think generally now appearance probably has, and I say appearance more, not the way you carry yourself, that's a slightly different, but appearance now, like people having tattoos or people, I think things like that are pretty much going out the window. Like there's wearing suits isn't something I've done for a long time, again, in my sector. So I think appearance is probably something slightly different. I think how you conduct yourself, how you carry yourself, the presence that you have, absolutely. And that's a big thing from martial arts, that I think martial arts does give you a sense of presence and a sense of confidence and a reliance in self. And I think that really helps. But if you can convey a sense of trust in what you're saying and what you're doing, in your beliefs or your vision, and people buy into that, then absolutely that's going to take you further than if you don't have that. So the ability to be authentic in front of an audience, to be credible, to build that trust that you know what you're doing, that will absolutely carry you further.
Yeah, I think that's following on from your point earlier about getting, people doing degrees, then coming into personal training and they don't have any sort of people skills, they don't have any charisma, they can't really talk to people very well, and they end up just failing really
I'd say the big thing for me about if you're doing a degree, and this comes from having recruited people and tried to place people with degrees, is if you can do a placement year, you will absolutely put yourself up much, much higher and you'll come across much better. And all the stats show you'll be more likely to go into the appropriate graduate level role by doing a placement. At the time I was looking at this, I think Aston University had the best, and they were 70+% of people going into graduate level roles because they mandated placements across every degree. So then you have your theory, and in your third year you do that application, you go into the workplace, you understand what it really takes. You do your fourth year, finishing your degree, and you're already got that that real balance of great knowledge and great application.
It definitely needs to be integrated, doesn't it?
100%.
But I think this is a good thing where you mentioned nursing degrees and that type of thing. And my degree was in exercise rehabilitation, so it was very similar to physiotherapy. And what attracted me to that degree was exactly that it was a combination of theory and applied and an application. And because it's a lot of it's manual therapy and delivering and prescribing exercise, you have to. And whether it's nursing or anything like that, often, you have that experience and the placement hours weaved in very, very early on in the degree. And for me, that was quite key.
Absolutely.
And I spent 1 week at the end of my first year working at the Royal Navy field gun event.
All right.
It's the event where the absolute lunatics in the military drag a cannon, strip it, put it back together, drag it up a thing.
I think my boy's done that.
Your boy?
I think there's field gun stuff up on the
field
hill.
gun.
Yeah.
Is that? Yeah. He was in the field gun team.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice. So I didn't know what it was. So, so I said, go mate. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
So I imagine the adult version is probably a little bit more grueling than the 10-year-old version.
He's a savage, mate.
Bigger field gun.
Yeah.
Is that all it is? Is it just bigger? Yeah.
But it's what the guys that do that and girls put themselves through in that week. So they basically do a week of bit drills and then actually compete on the weekend. So it's a whole week of just ruining your body. And I worked there for a week doing my placement at the moment, my first year. And we were in a sort of rehab or sort of injury clinic tent. So people would just drop in. And then I also spent some time with some of the teams or crews, working with the guys individually. And I learned more in that week of just being thrown in and just having to figure shit out, ask questions. And, I think for me, I always learn best if, and you mentioned this earlier, if I've got a problem and then I find the solution, I always remember that more than if I just learn something and then just go, right, that's a way for that.
I think that's the way that people learn though, isn't there? There's some people that do learn better like that, and there's people that can read a book and take in the information. I think most people are probably hands-on learning, I'd say, in general. You know, people that doctors and, you know, nurses maybe, you know, they're a lot more intellectual, but like a lot of people, I think, learn from just doing stuff.
I wanted to ask you about this because obviously learning styles is something that I remember being in the industry. And to Danny's point, having worked with personal trainers and led personal trainers, they're amazing people that they're great at just applying stuff and being on the job floor and working with people. But you try and get them to fill out a form on a PC or learn from a textbook, and it just goes over the head. So can you just talk a little bit about the different types of learning styles?
I'm not going to go into, because they have been well defined, and there's huge amounts of research in different styles. I think how I'm going to answer that is understanding your own is probably more important.
Yeah, that's a much better question, and it just goes back to just thinking about trying to get promoted.
Yeah.
How do I learn in the best, most efficient way to do better?
So if you're engaging in a piece of learning, and so learning is simply if you're trying to inform yourself or you're trying to improve a skill or whatever it might be, you've got to find the modality that works for you. So if you get enthused by reading a book, great. If you get enthused by having a conversation like this, perfect. If you can't bear either of those, you want to watch a video, fine. You want to listen to a podcast. It's finding out what works for you and then sticking with it. And in the world of information that we have now, I can recommend a book, great book called The Trusted Advisor, really good from a business point of view. There are so many videos on YouTube that will tell you exactly what it's about. There are so many discussions around it that you can listen to. So you don't have to choose classroom-based learning or, I don't know, whatever, like, academic. The options are pretty much endless these days, but what's important is finding out what works for you. So for me, and I'm more aware of this now because in, 2016, I qualified as a strengths coach through Gallup.
Through a what coach, sorry?
Strengths coach. So through Gallup, they're a global organisation.
You say strength?
Strengths coach, not physically.
Right.
So strength finder. Yeah,
okay.
Otherwise you would have known, right? And it comes from positive psychology based on the question, what would happen if we started looking at what's right with people rather than what's wrong with them?
Ah, right. So looking at their strengths. Yeah.
So for me, I lead with a strategic outlook, and then I have a conviction that actually, I've done the research that's probably the right thing to look at. And what that means partly for me is that I want to understand the gist of something. I need the high level overview. I won't go into the detail. I need to understand, okay, what are the key points? Okay, I can see how that applies. I'm done. I'm okay with that. And I can pick something up quite quickly and get to grips with that. I don't want to go into the depth of it. That's my style. Now I know that I can consciously engage with learning or with growth or development in that way. So again, it's back to that point of being really clear on what is it that you need to do and how is it that you're going to do that best. And the strength finder piece that I just mentioned, one of that things that talks about is being comfortable working in the way that motivates you most, and it's absolutely fine that that's totally different from anyone else, because you'll be the best version of you if you focus on how you want to do it rather than trying to do how somebody else does it.
I think as the future goes, I think it's definitely going to go that way more. I think they'll, even universities and all that sort of stuff, especially with like OpenAI chat and all that sort of stuff that's coming out now, I think it's going to move more into however you find best to learn.
Yeah.
Then you will learn that way. And I think that's great though, because again, like me, I never really read books. I listen to an audiobook.
I'm the same.
It's not that
it's funny that we're doing a podcast, huh?
I know. Well, the thing is, I'll read a book and I'll be thinking about my day and I can't focus on the book. I can't focus on it. But if I'm listening to it, I can carry on and do my things, and I can my consciousness goes in and out of the book as I'm listening to it, whatever I'm doing. Yeah. But if I have to sit there and read a book in silence, I'm not thinking about what I'm reading. I'm thinking about today I had that client, I had to do this, I had to do that. And then I'm going in overdrive. I can't relax with a book. Whereas I feel like if I'm watching a YouTube showing me this book, or like you said before, or an audio book or anything like that, I'm in. I can sit there for hours and listen to that, or a podcast or anything like that.
And that's the big thing. It's being comfortable being who you are. And that's a big point from a leadership is, you can't be a leader trying to be somebody else. You've got to be confident in who you are as a leader and be authentic in that approach.
I wanted to. You mentioned authentic leadership earlier. I wanted to ask what that meant.
Well, I guess for me, it's not. When I go into work, I show up like this. People see me like this. I'm not trying to be. Well, probably actually, yeah.
At lunchtime.
But it's, it's having the humility, having just being grounded, just being you, not trying to be Dan the leader.
I think it's a massive thing.
I am Dan. I happen to be a leader in the business, but I'm Dan first. And so being comfortable with who you are, not trying to be somebody else, not trying to do it somebody else's way is really, really profound. And it's one of the biggest developments, I guess, in my sort of management stroke leadership career was, having just a real open conversation with my team saying, look, I'm just here. I'm just, trying to get the job done. I need you to get behind me and support it because we're not going to get anywhere if you don't. And it was that moment of absolute humility where everyone was like, oh, actually, no, he's just a normal person, not trying to be a manager. And the engagement literally switched overnight. And so that authenticity piece is huge. There's another piece around that, though, is you don't have to do everything, right? You don't have to be great at everything. You really don't. If you know you're good at X, Y, and Z, work on that. But if you need a broader team or broader people around you to fill in some of your gaps, then build that.
Yeah.
Because
it's probably recognising that as well.
Yeah, recognise that, absolutely. So now I'm really conscious about that and I'm very intentional. I'm going to focus on these areas because that's what I'm really good at. But I know that I'll have this person who's got a different point of view or can challenge me or, we'll just look at things differently, which will make whatever we do stronger. So again, there's a lot of be comfortable with being who you are. If it's different from other people, that's absolutely fine.
I think people as well get into roles. They get into they get a promotion and they do change. They start getting this ego or they get these things and quite quickly people start to dislike them and then they struggle with the role because they haven't got people on board. And I think back to your point is that if you are yourself and you don't really change, you might say, yeah, I have to be a certain way because we have to get stuff done. We have to get shit done.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to accept you messing around. But I don't think you have to change your personality.
No, I don't think you do at all. I think that's
but people do though, don't they?
Yeah, you do.
People do, yeah.
You become authentic as a result of doing that. And there's a big thing, there's a word that you mentioned there, ego. Ego-centered leadership is just wrong. So you've got people trying to play the big I am, I'm more important, I'm more senior, that doesn't work. And I've seen it not work a lot.
Yeah. Because you lose the respect.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? You lose the respect of people. Because
if you're looking at, ego-led leadership is something you're doing for yourself. It's self-orientated. If your self-orientation comes across to people, it breeds distrust. The book I mentioned earlier, The Trusted Advisor, it talks about the trust equation. I don't recommend anyone go and look at it. There's probably a 3-minute video on YouTube that talks about it. But one of the things it talks about is self-orientation. So are you here having this conversation, from your point of view or for somebody else's? So if you're a leader and, you're trying to talk to somebody, you're having a conversation or getting a point across, and it's clear that it's your ego that's leading it, everyone's going to say, no, fuck off, you're a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of jiu-jitsu.
and that's not getting to egos in jiu-jitsu, mate. Fucking hell.
But any martial art with ego, you're absolutely right.
But even just, and I think someone mentioned, it might have been Toby last week, but someone mentioned about learning from everybody and how important that is.
Yeah.
And, there's some people that we know who are more senior belts who wouldn't take advice from you in your current belt position.
No, I wouldn't blame them.
Yeah. But equally, you showed me a technique the other week, and it was one that I might have seen years ago, but totally forgotten about. And then you showed me it again. I was like, yeah, sweet. So I'm learning from you, and I'm happy to do that and comfortable to do that. Whereas I think, some people aren't, but that applies to business, I think, as well. To what you were saying.
100%. It really, really does. There's a humility to it. I can learn something from the most junior person in that business and frequently do. And you've got to have the humility to do that. And it's the same it's a big thing that I think martial arts teaches you is humility, because no matter how good you are, there'll always be somebody who can come and batter you. And so not going in with having an ego is a huge part of martial arts. You know, the humility it teaches you is invaluable.
Yeah. It sounds like you think that martial arts is somewhat equipped you with the ability to be authentic and take those learnings from more junior colleagues and not feel threatened by that.
I'd say so. I first went into martial arts. So short answer, yes, absolutely. I think it's a large part of my success as a person. You know, I'm not remotely the finished article or the most successful person on the planet, but you know, I've enjoyed. I guess the success of being where I am now, and I think the martial arts has played a huge part in that. I first went into that when I was probably, I don't know, guess 8, 9, something like that. And I was watching probably a lot of, I don't know, kung fu type movies at the time, and I was just on and on at my parents. I was like, I want to do karate, kung fu, whatever like that. They ended up taking me to judo, and I was like, well, this isn't karate, but it's probably the best thing that I did because it was real, and it was difficult. And you got hurt and you get thrown around.
So people out there that don't know what judo is, what's judo?
I guess, why do you ask like those big questions?
Well, equivalent, like because I didn't know what judo was until I started jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
So I've heard of like judo, jiu-jitsu.
Okay, you got judo, judo. Judo is essentially the sport, one of the sport versions of the original types of Japanese jiu-jitsu. So it's based on throws to the floor, and then ground control to submissions, not in the same way that jiu-jitsu or BJJ works. But it's really practical, and it's a defensive martial art first, which is a really important point as well. I think, you know, while I think martial arts are great, I think it can be quite a challenge taking a 6-year-old lad who, or whatever age I was, 8, and going, right, here's how to punch and kick, but we don't want you to punch and kick anyone. I'm like, yeah, but I've just learned how to punch and kick. Everyone's getting it. Whereas judo it's a defensive martial art, so it teaches that restraint, control, discipline, and you know one of the most important things, it teaches you to fall, which sounds stupid, but
yeah,
you know,
I didn't know when I started jiu-jitsu. I didn't know how to fall. I remember I was doing like a couple of judo throws.
Yeah.
And they were chucking me on the mat, and I was just hitting so hard, and they were like, do you break fall? Yeah, and I was like, what's a break fall?
I just did break falling, thanks. Yeah, cheers.
Yeah, no, that was it though. But if you're out of that loop and you've never done any sort of martial art like me, I always played football, so I never had a clue. You know, I come in completely blind, and then we're just doing a couple of judo throws, and I was thinking, fuck me, I'm getting out.
Yeah, and you hit, if you don't break your fall, it hurts.
And I'm a big boy, you know, I hit hard.
Yeah.
So you started with judo, and then what did you go on to after that?
Well, so the judo thing was probably the first most humbling moment. I was getting quite good. I'd done pretty well in a couple of competitions. I was always training with the older boys in the class, like the higher belts, because I was prepared to take a beating, but I was like, that I'm going to learn more by working with the high level belts. And this family came in who hadn't been there for a while, and three girls, 3 sisters came in. And I was like, yeah, I'm fucking nails. I'm like one of the best. And they all soundly beat the shit out of me, including the youngest one, who's like a couple of years younger than me and a lower belt. And I was just like, yeah, ego just fucking goes out the door. You can't have it.
Yeah, you find that across so many different martial arts, though. I mean, I've had similar experiences as well. And I think when I got introduced to, I guess, judo, but, you know, sort of MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it was with the owner of Flow. And it was years ago before Flow existed, and I was training at Saints.
Yeah.
And I was doing Muay Thai, so Thai boxing, which is just the art of punching, kicking, elbowing and kneeing. But there's some clinch work involved with that as well. And there's a few throws that you're allowed to do. I forget the rules. I think you're not allowed
no
to...
trips, basically.
Yeah.
But you can... It's mostly from the head, isn't it?
Yeah, so you just off balance people, but you're not able to sort of step in with the hips or anything you do in judo. Yeah. And I was doing some clinch work with this guy, and I was, again, quite a big lad, probably about 15 stone, so 95 kilos, somewhere around there. And we were doing clinch work, and this guy just launched me in the air, and I got taken off my feet, and I flew through the air, and it had never happened to me in my life, and it was so humbling. Hopped up, did it again. And I said, mate, how have you just done that? And he was like, just judo. bit of judo.
just cash, cash, yeah.
And that was then when I transitioned more into grappling sports. But throughout my journey in martial arts, Thai boxing, there was an occasion where you had some guy in, he was a bit of a thug, and he was sparring with a girl. He was over my shoulder, and I could hear him beating her up in sparring. So I thought, right, I'll get hold of this lad next round, and I'll, at least I'm his own size. Mm-hmm. So the round ended, I turned around, and this poor guy was just bleeding from the nose. His eye was swelling a little bit, and it wasn't him beating the girl up, she was beating him up. And he was so much bigger.
I had the same experience at Saints as well.
Yeah, might have been the same girl.
Some savages down there. Yeah, that's what you'd say.
So
world champion.
I grew up in probably quite a traditional family, and male female role models, quite traditional, verging on Victorian probably at times. And when I went to Saints, so that was my first. So I did karate for a while, but karate at the time.
So what was Saints? Like just a mixed martial arts place?
Muay Thai focus, but they went into MMA.
Yeah, so I'd say it started as a Thai boxing school.
Okay, cool.
But then they sort of they introduced sort of MMA or cage fighting as it was called back then, which was a combination of multiple martial arts kind of just thrown together.
And so I was like, you don't know when was a real standard. And so like coming into start sparring, and this one there, like, found it really difficult. So how do I, and she's like, can you just tip me? And I was like, and she's like, have you got any idea how fucking arrogant you are to think that you can't you're going to hit me hard enough to stop me, and that I've got no ability to manage this? It's fucking insulting. Can you please hit me? And I was like, fuck, I've just realised what a dick. I've immediately assumed that with no experience at all, I'm going to be better than somebody who's training. And again, it was another really humbling experience. So I then tried to hit her. She smiled as I did, and then proceeded to batter the fuck out of me again. I was like, right, okay, again, humbling. You can't go into it.
Those sort of lessons though that you can't explain to people that don't do mixed martial art. Like I went in again completely blind, and I thought, big lad, I'll be all right. I went in there, and again, a girl who is pretty good, I'd say, she battered me. Yep. Absolutely battered me at jiu-jitsu, and I left there and I thought, fuck me, my nuts are in a briefcase here. Like, Jesus, I need to go home and find them, because and you go back and you think, and then I was like wary, like not in a thing, but you just become really aware that if you are untrained, anyone who's got a bit of training
is better immediately.
Is better.
Yeah.
6 months of training. Yeah. You will be better than any person who comes in off the street. Yeah. And you say that to people and they go, no way. And I'm like, I'm telling you, mate, like you can't even explain to people. Like, you speak to people and they think they're hard, or they think they're this, or they think they're that, or they fancy themselves, and they say, well, I don't know, bit boxing, or I don't know. It doesn't fucking matter. It literally doesn't matter. If someone gets hold of you and they know jiu-jitsu or judo or they're kickboxing or there's, MMA background at all, they're fucked. They are fucked.
It was even the example of your lad, wasn't it? He was got into a bit of a school fight, I think, and used his kickboxing or Thai boxing ability to just embarrass this kid. Tell the story. What happened?
So I don't know how much detail I should go into it, but
you might be listening. So pray.
Yeah, it's going to listen.
Or don't.
So, and this is it's a broader point there, because he now has a choice about how to behave. If he's, he can choose how hard he goes. He can choose, if you've got somebody who has no training at all, they're going to go, as hard as they can to get out of that situation, not mindful of the damage they can cause either to themselves or other people. And what he has now is choice. So he can say, look, I don't want to fight. And he will walk away and try and stop it. But if he's in the place where he has to, somebody was trying to essentially fight him, and he was just like, no, I don't want to, they don't need to, try to disarm it. And eventually this other lad, tries swinging at him. My son was just stepping back and moving out of the way, and then just lightly tapping him and moving back out the way and tapping back. And, there's this lad trying his best to have a fight. And he's just, my son is essentially just not even engaging and just making him look stupid. So he's just said, look, we can keep this up as long as you want, or you can just stop now, because I don't want to fight you. There's probably other ways you can do it. He probably didn't need to humiliate him to that extent, but it's a choice.
But you say that though, but then he could have just kicked his head in though.
Yeah, he
could
have just battered him.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So the training in martial arts gives you choice, but it gives you restraint and discipline and control and humility,
And And I think going back to the very original point where we got off on that is certainly for me, and it sounds like for you as well, that having done martial arts over the years and being humbled on multiple occasions on the mats, when I've worked in leadership roles, it's just made me very open and confident about being wrong and asking questions and not knowing and being okay with that. And I think, if people can sort of achieve that mindset, I think it will support them a lot in leadership.
There's something you just said that I think is really important to note is being confident enough to be wrong, being confident enough to ask questions, being confident enough to say, yeah, I got that wrong.
Or I don't know.
Yeah, or I don't know. It shows far more confidence to say, I don't know, what are you talking about, than it does not to.
Yeah.
And I think it's maybe a legacy of the school system, or I don't know, but people not feeling comfortable saying, hang on a minute, you just used a word there, I didn't get it, what is it? Or, yeah, I fucked up. You know, those things are really powerful in business. And if you can say that, you're demonstrating huge confidence.
I think it's like that in life, though. Like when we were doing the podcast, one thing that we were really adamant about is we didn't want to talk out of our wheelhouse too much. We didn't want to talk about. I think too many people talk about stuff they have no clue about. They go on and they say, give advice, and they have no right to give advice on, and then they then talk. They just talk shit, and then people take on that advice on a platform or on, whatever it is, even in work or, trying to get promotions, trying to, just blow smoke up their ass. And I think that is a massive point.
I think that's something that's just made me think about the importance of having the right people around you. And I recognise that I'd kind of been doing this either instinctively some years ago and now do it very, very intentionally. Because I also believe that the large part of the success isn't necessarily just me. It's by having a group of people around me in work, out of work, that actually add value to that. So I develop my ideas, my thinking, my innovation, whatever, in conversation. So if I have a group of people around me, then I'll come up with great ideas. So I have to now consciously create an environment where that can happen. In lockdown, I was working on one of the biggest pieces of work that our organisation had put together, and I was really struggling. And I'm used to writing big bids, big pieces of work. I'm used to pulling together compelling pitches, presentations, the whole lot. And I was just like, I can't get my solution together. I can't get the flow. I can't get my head into it at all. And eventually, I was like, right, that's it. I need you, and you. We're in the office. We're going to sort it out. Literally in a day, got it all clear, got it all sorted, was back, motivated back on and got it together. So making sure that you've got the right people around you is hugely important, because the success that I've experienced, I believe, is also down to having positive people around me that I can rely on, that will challenge me, that will give me a different point of view.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, so I'm glad you brought it up. And I think you just literally touched on a really good point there, which is about they'll challenge you. And I think if you develop people around you, then they'll call you out on your bullshit.
Yep.
And I think that's so important.
It really is.
And then again, it comes back to having that confidence to go, yeah, actually, you're right, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Let's do it your way, and figure things out. So I think, having that team around you, and I guess to some extent that applies for life as well. Call it a network or whatever you want, but having a good group of friends around you, I think that's really important.
And it's friends around you who are prepared to be that blunt. And
they want you to do well.
Yeah, it's come from the right place. We spoke about intent earlier. It comes from the right place. Having friends around you who will add rather than detract. I think that's another important one. So people who challenge you positively for the right reasons, rather than necessarily, I don't know, be a drain. It's not. I'm saying that you can't be there to support people who do. You need to, but if that's your entire network of people who do take, or people who drain, how are you gonna go forward with?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what's the saying? You're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? So if the people you spend the most time with, or the 5 people you spend the most time with, are all negative fucks, and and they're just sucking the life out of you, and every idea that you've got, they're like, nah, you can't do that, it's a bad idea. Then you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
how many people though are like that? Fucking loads. Like when you speak about anything, I'm going to do this. Oh, why are you going to do that? Well, why not?
That's not going to work.
Why not? Yeah. What, do you actually think you're going to make money out of that? Well, if it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But at least I'm trying. At least you're trying.
If it doesn't, it's still good fun anyway. It's worth doing.
No, but yeah, it's like that with anything. I've done loads of different stuff over the years, loads of different businesses. It's very different to both of you. But all the time I've done it, my wife's been really supportive. But other people in my life have said to me, why don't you just get a proper job? Why don't you just do this? And then when I started earning money and being successful and being in the paper, and I was on like BBC Devon and done loads of different cool stuff, then they're like, oh, well done, mate. Oh, yeah, I knew you did it. And then it's like, they get to a point where they're kind of kissing your ass a little bit because you've had that success. And then it makes me think, oh, just fuck off.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Just
total lack of authenticity from them to you. Yeah,
and that's how. And don't get me wrong, I've not like fucking made millions and been super successful, but I've done all right. Do you know what I mean? Like I've done all right with my little ventures and the things I've done over the years. But people have flat out just like kind of laughed at me. I've had people saying, "Oh, I hope your shop burns down. I hope this happens." Or just being really like just nasty and just but they're people that I was hanging around with. You know what I mean? There were people that I would just be like.
Yeah, so not that.
Yeah, exactly though. But again, they were people that I was hanging around.
I hope your shop burns down. Yeah,
I've had that.
I'm your friend.
Yeah, I've had that. Yeah, I had that. Yeah.
So pick your mates, and I think so network's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think there's, the relationship that I have with you in terms of like you will be that blunt and honest to me and challenge me. But I recall going back a few years ago, we were talking somewhere in Saltash about the move that you made in your career now to take a really significant risk from a well-paid, achieving role, that most people would consider actually quite a success in its own right, to go and become a self-employed PT. And that whole conversation, I wonder to what extent, if you'd had loads of people around you going, Paul, what are you doing? That's just ridiculous. Don't do that. Like, would that have influenced you enough, or would you still made it? But the importance of having people around you go, yeah, it's a great idea, let's figure out how, is hugely, hugely important.
Yeah, I remember that conversation, and there were certainly people around me, not through malice, probably similar to a lot of other people that you've experienced, but who were telling me it was a really bad idea.
Yeah.
Because as you say, I was in a permanent, well-paid job, and I was looking to then move from that into a career in personal training and fitness, where I was starting from nothing. So there were a few people going, you can't do that, that's insane, that's mad. And I think I'd already learned at that point, it was kind of picking whose opinion to value more.
Yeah.
And your opinion I valued a lot. And I think you were very positive at the time, but also quite frank and candid in regards to some of the things we need to consider, which were really important. And the other thing I realised at that point as well is, because I made a success of that and did very well. And
absolutely, yeah, very well. Huge success, yeah.
And looking back, I realised that certainly some of the individuals that were saying, who were very close to me, who were saying you can't do that, I realised that they weren't necessarily reflecting what their opinion of me was. It was their own opinion of themselves. And what they were really saying was, I can't do that. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. So if I were in your position, I don't think I could achieve what you're setting out to achieve. And now when I hear negativity, that's almost what I hear. It's not people saying you can't do that. It's them saying I can't do that. And I'm not them, so I don't listen.
That's a really good distinction. I like that. Yeah. And I think it's right. It's like, you can't do that. I'm like, prove me wrong. Yeah. I can.
And I've always found that a huge motivator when people tell me I can't do something.
Kind of like, okay, right, I will do just,
100%. So I have a question for you. What's more important, purpose or process?
Purpose every day of the week. So it's a fundamental thing I've lived my career by, is understanding why you're doing something, understanding the purpose of what you're looking to achieve, and not the process. And so if the process doesn't support the purpose, it's the process that's wrong. So it's a really good check. Anything you're doing, do I want to move jobs? Why? What's the purpose? What am I trying to achieve? Do I want a promotion? I've come up with a new initiative. What's the purpose? People aren't engaging with what they're doing. Do they know their own purpose? It's a really good way of sort of establishing the effectiveness or the success of something happening. So I think that there's probably some examples I need to talk about where the process can be achieved at the expense of the purpose.
I've just thought of an example, actually, now you've explained it. And I'll share what you think of one. I'm sure you've got plenty. Yeah. So I think this is what you mean by that term. So I was leading a team of personal trainers, and I was a bit of a stickler for detail. So name badges. Where your name badge?
Fucking hell, do my nuts.
Yeah, me too. Because I'm like, if I want you to know my name, I'll tell you.
But I was a stickler for it because I just thought little details were important. And I came in one day, and one of the PTs didn't have a name badge on, and they had a fleece on. They were wearing the sort of fitness top and the fleece over the top. I said, "Where's your name badge?" And they went, "Oh, I'm wearing it." And I was like, "No, you're not." And they went, "Look, I'm wearing it." And got a bit shitty about it. I was like, "Yeah, but I can't see it." And they were like, "You might as well wear it
it's
in your
on."
pocket."
I was about to say, put it in your pocket.
Yeah, I was like, "You might as well wear it in your pocket." And I think the point was, and I think this is
That's
what I'm
exactly
saying,
it, yeah.
is that obviously the process, she was wearing the name badge, but the purpose of wearing the name badge is that someone could see it and read your name. And for me, that was just, it was a prime example of someone putting just a process over the purpose. Going, yeah, right, name badge, it's on, don't know why or what.
Exactly that. So I think when I was managing a sales team, and I think you've experienced this too, is I've done 50 calls this week. Great, okay, good. And what have you got with them? Nothing. So, right. But I've done 50 calls. Okay. But you've got nothing out of them. Yes, but I've got, and it's like this obsession with the number of calls, because as an organisation, what was being driven was you need to make 50 calls a week. Well, the purpose behind those 50 calls was to get a visit or a client appointment or whatever it might have been. So if he'd said, I've made 5 calls this week, great, and I've got 5 visits, brilliant. I don't want to know if you made 50 calls, you've got nothing out. There's no point. So it goes back to what's the purpose of making that call in the first place? Because I'm going to go, hi, yeah, I made a call, bye, every time. And I've achieved the process perfectly. I can make 100 calls like that. But if I haven't made one client appointment or whatever the purpose of that call is, I've achieved the process at the expense of the purpose.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important. And I know when I've been in roles previously, when I've done better in roles, it's when the leader or my boss or whatever you want to call them, it's been more outcome focused.
Yeah.
Where they don't micromanage, because I've done those roles as well, and I was never very good at them, funny enough. And people were like, "This is the outcome. I don't care how you get it done. Just get it done." And for me, first of all, that just tells me that they have a level of trust in me, and I want to repay that level of trust by doing a good job and delivering the outcome.
Yeah, and you're speaking to a couple of things that are really important. When I talk about my own learning and development, throughout my career, there's a couple of people I'll talk about there that you've spoken about. So trust is the big thing, and that trust advisor, trust equation. There's lots of research, lots of other people who will talk about it. It's the foundation of every effective relationship. So if somebody trusts you to do something, they give you the autonomy to do something. There's a theory of motivation by Dan Pink, and he speaks about once you take out the money side of things, people need to be paid enough to be recognised in an equitable, fair way. Mm-hmm. Take that out, 3 things essentially contribute to motivation. The first one is autonomy. So are you trusted to do what you need to do in your way, in a way that makes sense to you? And you have the freedom in which to operate. Do you have the opportunity to develop mastery? So can you improve at what you do? Can you develop within what you do? Can you, essentially, improve? Can you get better at what it is you're doing? So if you can do that and you've got the autonomy, then you're going to drive motivation. And then the third one is purpose. So are you clear on your why? Why do you exist within the organisation? How does what you do today impact the success of the business or your team, more broadly? So those 3 things, and you just picked up on 2 of those straight away. So
Simon Sinek talked a lot about starting with a why.
Start with a why.
Yeah. And it's so important. And when I've worked in leadership roles previously, I've always found that you get a far better response from people when you explain the why. It's, I think he's obviously onto something there.
No, he absolutely is. And I used that. It talks about the golden circle. Start with why. So it's the why you do it, the what you do, and the how you do it. And I use that to structure presentations, to talk about strategy, to talk about. There's a big piece of work that I've done recently across the division that I'm responsible for. So it's about 110 or so people. Is every role has a why, a what, and a how. So we can say at the most junior level, they understand their why, and how their why supports the team why, and how that team why supports the division why, and how that why supports the organisational why. And if you give people the context, and they understand that by doing this it supports, and by doing that it doesn't, you then equip, your managers to have the right conversations. And also it should be about transparency, right? So they can see, okay, well, I might like to do that job. Well, what does that job actually look like? What's their why? How can I then start to develop myself to aim for that? I guess that goes back to some of the conversation we've had earlier around promotion or career development, is that gap analysis. If I want to be in this role, what does that mean? What does that look like? What do they need to have? And where am I in relation to that? And then do I need to fill that by a course, by a mindset, by whatever it might be? But you kind of need to have done that gap analysis first to understand what it is you need to do differently to demonstrate that level of skill set or experience.
Yeah, I think when I started out my role as a PT with Paul, one of the things that I'd done straight away was I looked at what I needed to do and how fast I needed to do it to make myself it viable for me to live. So it was like I went in and that was the why. And then I was working loads of long hours, pretty much for free at times. And I remember one instance where quite a high-level doctor kept talking to me and saying that he wanted some personal training and all this sort of stuff. And my shift finished at like 7, but he wasn't coming into the gym till about 9:30. I sat there and waited for 2.5 hours, and I was pretty excited because I thought, I could get him maybe on a couple of sessions and all this sort of stuff. And a couple of the PTs come up and it's like, "Well, you still here?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just waiting for so-and-so." They said, "Oh, just go and come back." And I was like, "Nah, I don't want to miss him, blah, 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 blah." Waited there the 2 hours. He walked in and he said, "How much is it?" And then didn't even give me a chance for a sales pitch, nothing like that. He just went, "No, it's too expensive." Walked out. And at the time I was like, oh God, But in my head, I knew that my system that I was creating to get these clients in was like working. So I didn't let it deter me. The next night I waited about an hour for my next client, and then they signed up for 2, and then the person after signed up for another 2. So then I went from having this really bad experience to carrying on doing what I thought was right and what I needed to do to get to where I needed to be. Whereas people were saying to me, "Oh, fucking, I wouldn't do that." And then it just really hit me that the process that I was doing in my system of getting clients, being really friendly, going up, speaking to people, getting appointments, sitting, waiting around. I was working loads, and I wasn't getting a lot out of it at that point. But really fast, I started racking up clients and numbers, and I knew I was good at my job. So that was a big thing. I knew I was good. I knew I was a good PT, and I knew I could do that well. So I just needed to find a way to get clients. And one of the big things that I changed with that is I told everyone when I was selling them PT and was talking about that, I broke it down. Instead of saying it was £200 a month, I said it was £50 a week. Little differences like that really, for me, straight away changed everything. And then I'd say that to my other colleagues and they would just not do it. But then they were like, "Oh, how are you getting that many people? How have you done that?" And I'm like, "It's the way you're wording it. If you say to someone it's £200 a month, you think, fuck, that's a lot of money. Say £50 a week. Or if you break it down even more, it's £10 a day." It's those types of things. But that's exactly what you're talking about there, and the why and the process of me doing that. Yeah. And I just kept to that. And then really quickly I got established in my job.
And I think there's something that you just highlighted there is, the conviction to keep doing something you believe in. Yeah. Even in the face of actually, that's been difficult, that wasn't a great experience, but still doing it.
Yeah, it was really shit. I waited there, honestly, 2 hours. He'd come in, he just went, "How much?" And I was like trying to sell it. He was like, no, how much? And I was like, "It's that." And he just went, "No, too much." Walked away. And
was
I
it
thought,
a doctor, did you say?
Doctor, yeah. Yeah, well, it's whatever he's willing to spend, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah. We're nearly out of time, but one last thing I just wanted to bring back up, because we kind of mentioned it sort of throughout the it's been a theme throughout the entire podcast, but is accountability. And we've talked about leadership and sales and getting promoted and everything else. But just to close out, just to summarize what accountability kind of means and where it really applies to the big picture.
So I think it applies in a number of ways. If you hold yourself accountable for something, you essentially give yourself the authority, the power to do something about it. If I blame you for that same thing, I've given away my power to do it to you because it's now your responsibility because it's your fault that's happened or whatever it might be. An example for me is parenting versus teachers. So when I hear someone say, the teachers should have done that, the teachers should have done that, the teacher's responsible for it, I'm like, okay, but where's your role in that? You're the parent. Because as soon as I say, or it's the government's responsibility, maybe not even teachers. If it's somebody else's responsibility, I've just abdicated my power, my authority, that's gone. It's on somebody else to do it. So I can sit here and do nothing because I'm no longer holding myself accountable for it. And great, and I do nothing, nothing's going to change. So accountability for me is the way of equipping yourself with the authority to do something that needs to be done. And for me, also, perhaps from a workplace point of view, if I'm accountable for it, it means I can do what I want, pretty much. Because, if I do something that works and it's great and it has a big impact, I guarantee you no one's going to say, well, fuck, Dan, why the fuck have you done that? You've just, improved a whole system, or you've made more clients, or you've, protected the company a better way. Can you just undo it? It's not going to happen, right? So the accountability for me gives me authority to do things that I want to do.
And that goes both ways, though, doesn't it?
Accountable for it. Yeah.
If it doesn't work, it goes the other way, doesn't it?
Then I hold up my hands up and say it didn't. And so if I look back from a career point of view, I've made big changes in a business without asking for a single person's permission, because I believed in it. I thought it was going to be the right thing to do, and it was. It worked really well. We changed the whole process around how we onboarded customers, and it was much more effective. We ended up achieving something like the same targets or more with the team that was 60% less, smaller in size. And that approach was then adopted across many other offices within the same organisation. So I kind of proved it. I didn't ask anyone for permission because I held myself accountable to do it.
But if that went wrong, would you effectively been sacked?
Potentially, I could have.
Do you know what I mean?
And that's what comes back to so what I'm good at is coming up with a strategy and having the conviction that I believe it's right. And I don't do that in isolation. I always have conversations with people, get different insights, make sure I'm building out a well-rounded strategy. But then I'll have the conviction to follow it through.
Yeah, I think it's having the knowledge and the self-belief to do that, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Within the role, and it's a calculated risk that that is very unlikely to go wrong.
And you have to work it through. So again, why am I doing this? What am I looking to achieve? And what essentially we had was a mandated process through the contract that we were operating under to do 10 different things. And the way we were doing it was just so inefficient and was disengaging everyone. I was just we've got to find a different way of doing this. And I got the whole team stopped. We went out of operations for a day. The whole team ran a workshop with people to come up and did some big customer journey mapping. Totally changed the way that we did this, so that within the first day of customers being there, they would have had all of those things done in a way that supported the purpose, not just achieving the process. But yeah, and it's another thing for me is I will be unlikely to ask a question if I don't think I'm going to like the answer. I'd rather just not ask it.
Right, okay.
So can I do that? If I think the answer's going to be no, I won't ask it.
Well, you're a little bit like that. I know when we were putting this together, the amount of things that we were wanting to do with the room, and I was like, I don't know, should we ask first? You're like, nah, just do it.
Yeah. So I guess it's a personality type, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like one of those things. Like I'd rather at times progress and get something done than procrastinate and argue with maybe a stupid little thing that's not really going to have any difference to the end product. You know what I mean?
And I think it's ultimately the you've choice, right? It's down to choice. In any situation, you either do something or don't. And if you hold yourself accountable, you give yourself the permission to do something about it. Good. Cool. Mic drop.